We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I am the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am super excited to welcome our next guest onto interview series, Matt Soto. He is a Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Manager at BuzzFeed Inc. Matt, it's so good to see you and have this conversation. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for folks who are listening, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how exactly you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Matt Soto. I use he, him pronouns. And I've been working at BuzzFeed Inc. for the last year now as the Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Manager. I've been doing diversity work for almost a decade now, in a couple of different areas. Before I moved into the media world, I was actually in education for almost 10 years. So working in student affairs and helping kind of build diversity initiatives and student success initiatives and things like that. When I was younger, what did I want to be when I grew up? I I changed many times, I think, like many people, but I think since a young child, the thing I can really remember is wanting to be a teacher. Teachers were people that really impacted me at a young age, and I wanted to be just like them. I wanted to help people. I wanted to teach people. We used to play like school, me and my little sister, and I would never let her be the teacher. It was always me. And so, yeah, I think being a teacher, and then eventually that came true. I do teach, and I've worked in the university setting for a long time now, and I love being a teacher. And in my day-to-day job, I get to teach people all the time and help kind of support their growth and hold people accountable. And yeah, I really enjoy what I do.
I love that. I also used to play school. I had a big old Filofax and would have my mom as one of the students, and I loved it. I think teachers have a huge impact on people's lives in general, too. Fast forward to today, I have so many questions around kind of company culture and building that sense of belonging in microcosms of communities, which is the workplace. One of the trends we're seeing is that a lot of folks across the border are looking for flexibility and looking for their employers to really support their full lives at work. And the adoption of radical flexibility is not only a nice to have, but a need to have. It raises the number of employees defined by high performing by around 40%, according to one study. What role does that flexibility play in your company culture?
Yeah, I think radical flexibility is something that I became very familiar with when I left my last industry and I moved into working at BuzzFeed. I think BuzzFeed does some incredible work to make people feel like their self-care and their mental health matters. And so it was the first time when I left my previous role. I had been there almost 10 years, and I had about 300, if not more, hours of unclaimed sick time that I just lost. Like it was just, I never took sick. I had almost an equal amount of vacation hours that I just never took, because it was always chaotic. I was doing multiple roles within my job. Even if people encouraged me to take time off, it wasn't really built into the culture. So if I took time off, it would just put me further behind, and it just wasn't. Uh, it was rough. It was really rough. And so when I got to BuzzFeed, I mean, even from day one, talking about our PTO and what that looks like, and a self-care day, and every month since the start of the pandemic, we've given folks a single day of self-care day they can take, no questions asked, on top of their regular PTO, and allotted sick time that employees get. And so that's been pretty life-changing for me in trying to kind of understand how important mental health is, and how important, especially in the dawn of the pandemic, right? We were experiencing multiple pandemics at once, right? We had the huge COVID-19 pandemic. There was racial injustice. There continues to be racial injustice in the world. And it impacts people at different volumes and in different ways. And people need opportunities to take care of themselves. And so I think radical flexibility, it kind of makes sense, right? It's weird to call it radical because it shouldn't be radical. It should be the norm. We should be treating other humans like humans, and not kind of engaging in this power dynamic of these are the rules and you must follow them to a T. You know, I've heard some pretty horrific nightmare stories from people who work all over the place that, you know, I had a friend who lost her mother, and in a kind of really, really sad and depressing moment, told her employer, hey, I just lost my mother. I need to take time off. And the employer responded with, I'm so sorry for your loss. Please let me know if you want this to be sick or vacation time. It was like, what the hell? You know, like, what are
Absolutely.
we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing in our workforce if we're not treating each other like humans that experience pain and challenges? And uh it's just such a it's unfortunate that that it's referred to as radical flexibility, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree that the pandemic and everything that we have, the multiple pandemics we've experienced in the past 3 years have really accelerated the conversations for mental well-being, physical well-being, emotional well-being, and opened up the door for these conversations at sometimes faster at other places than some. And it's really important to create those structures where people feel like they can take time, they can take that flexibility. And there's research that shows, for example, when you have the flexibility available for working parents, it's better for literally everyone. And when you make something better for a historically marginalized group of folks, it's better for literally everyone in the system too. How do you think about in terms of that flexibility, the benefits, and really impacting the employee experience from working parents to folks who just started the organization to new graduates who are, joining BuzzFeed?
Yeah, I think again, I think radical flexibility, you know, no one is really harmed in the process, right? Of just giving people space and time that they need to take care of themselves and to pick up their kids from school or attend a volleyball game, or, you know, I think the fact that this is so it's mind-boggling that this is a surprising thing that we're going through, right? That now suddenly people are showing radical flexibility and they're seeing such amazing like results, both business wise and employee satisfaction and things like that. Like, yeah, of course, right? If
Or
people are happier in their day-to-day lives, they're going to do better work, they're going to be happier in their jobs, they're going to be less likely to, you know, dip out of an organization that is treating them well and prioritizing their well-being. Now, is there a lot of work to do? Of course, right? We operate in a society that really values productivity over everything. And so, what does productivity look like, and how do we redefine that? It's going to take some real transformational leadership across the workforce to really think about what do we think about productivity and what do we think about when it comes to whether that's revenue or that's reaching goals, whether it's sales goals or production goals or whatever that looks like. Um, how do those goals measure up to the goals of also having happy, satisfied, cared for employees? I think that's one of the most critical pieces that we're going to start to see in the workforce, because, you know, as much as the pandemic is not over, we're definitely acting as though it is, right? And so people are going quote unquote back to work. People are going from fully remote to working hybrid to going back into the office. And we're just kind of ignoring the fact that this happened, you know, this traumatic event happened to all of us over the last several years. And it's kind of just like, all right, you know, shake your hands, dust your hands of it, and move forward. Now it's time to get back to work. And the more that I think organizations are willing to pause and really think about, okay, what does getting back to work look like? I think they'll see a greater impact on the work that they do and the experience of people who work for them.
I think taking a pause and making an intentional kind of choice is really important. And to our point of, quote unquote radical flexibility, not taking a one size fits all approach to things, really listening to people. Something that is true is that we've all experienced these pandemics together, but we don't know how each person at a company has experienced it with their family individually, what they're going through and what their story is. You need to create that psychological safety, to your point, to say, okay, if somebody does want to share that, that they feel like they are going to be listened to, that they have these strong ties with their team or someone they work with as well. How do you kind of leverage that power of storytelling to foster a sense of community and really that belonging at BuzzFeed as well?
Absolutely, storytelling is so important. I think especially, I'm a data nerd. I just graduated with my doctorate just last month,
Yay,
and
congrats.
so thank you. And research is now a second language I speak in this world. And I think the qualitative data really matters, right? I think understanding the lived experiences of your participants or employees or constituents or whatever you want to call your people, understanding the lived experience is going to help shape your decision making, right? If nobody is sharing with us that, hey, as a parent, I daycare is rough and I've been doing it for the last 2 years. So now that I'm working from home, I'm just gonna keep my kid at home and this is what I'm gonna do and this is what I need to be successful. If nobody tells us that, then we're making assumptions based on our own privileges, right? And we're making assumptions and decisions based on our individual lived experiences, and people run the gamut on how they experience these pandemics, right? Like I have people who lost both parents in the pandemic or who, have had COVID several times. And then my experience is very different. I never got COVID, right? And I still haven't. And I'm knocking on wood that it hasn't happened. We've been careful and we've taken care of ourselves. And we've, but if I were to make all the decisions based on my kind of narrow experience within the pandemic, then it wouldn't really be informed by people's stories, and people's stories is what matters, right? I think that it's important for us to really get to the meat and potatoes of people's lived experiences in order to better understand how to support them. I think you can't really create a one size fits all experience. And at BuzzFeed, I work with our employee resource groups. And so I can't create an employee resource group experience that's going to be the same and uniform from year to year. And we're going to have the same things every month or say, we need to find out what our members need and what do people want in their workspace and what are they missing and where are they not feeling loved and cared for and how can we kind of fill some of those gaps, right? At the end of the day, that's all we all want, is to feel cared for, appreciated, to feel like what we do matters, right? um, but we can't do that unless we're asking people about what they need. So I think leveraging storytelling is critical, and creating space for people to share those stories. That's the hard part, right? Once you get the stories, it's kind of hard to unhear it, right? Once you hear someone's lived experience, you can't just turn a cheek. Well, it wouldn't be easy to turn a cheek and just say, well, okay, that was that person's experience. Let me move forward. But creating space and platforms for people to share what they're going through is a different story. And I think it's hard for some companies and organizations to do that.
It's definitely hard, and we're not talking about transactional storytelling where Matt shares his story, I share mine, and there's no dialogue in between.
Right.
And I've never stepped in your shoes, you've never stepped in my shoes. So there's going to be a two-way conversation happening. This could be with a group, it could be one-on-one. And sometimes there are disagreements or there's questions, and there's that whole intention versus impact conversation as well when we're telling stories and we're telling other people's stories. I don't necessarily think hard conversations or conflict is a bad thing. I think it's something that is inevitable, but how you react and move through nonviolent communication, all of that good stuff is important. One study found that only 39% of folks reported either being trained, coached, or really talking about handling this inevitable workplace conflict. How have you seen leaders, especially managers and executives, who I think have kind of a unique role to play here, really lean into hard conversations and really navigating that.
Yeah, this is an important study, right? 39% of individuals reported actually receiving training or coaching in handling workplace conflict. Uh, I think it takes a certain level of radical candor, right? I think that's a buzz term that's going around now. I think difficult conversations involve a lot of bravery, depending, of course, on the topic. In my world, oftentimes difficult conversations have to do with identity and people's lived experiences and privilege and microaggressions. And so when I'm trying to kind of coach a manager or an employee on how to approach a difficult conversation, specifically around issues of diversity, inclusion, and belonging, it, there's no, like I said, one hat fits all. There is no method to teaching people how first say this and then say this. Here's the script, and then there's none of that, right? What you have to teach people is about the importance of storytelling, the importance of empathy, the importance of seeing people in the same space as you, and creating connection, because when you have a sincere connection with someone, it's much easier to give a person feedback or hold them accountable or have one of these difficult conversations if you've built that relationship, right? You know, human capital is important, and I think building those relationships helps build human capital and helps us to be better at navigating moments that can be really difficult. I'll share an example. Just recently, um, I uh, I teach, right? I teach at a couple of different institutions, and I was working with a student who was trying to navigate a conversation with another faculty member, and they shared that the faculty member had made some comments about um, how they spent their time and if they were really ready for a graduate program, or and they made a lot of like insinuations about what this student might be doing, especially as she was a woman of color. And so, oh, do you have kids? Is that slowing you down? Are you married? Asking all of these like really inappropriate questions. And so the student came to me, and I had to really encourage her to push back against that, right? And that's hard because this professor, or take it out of a school context and put it into a work context, a manager or someone in power has something to leverage here, right? In school, it's a grade. At work, it's your job, or it's a bonus, or it's a raise, or whatever that is. And so I think being able to navigate those conversations, especially when you are kind of the victim of something, or when you're really experiencing something that's challenging, that's hard. That's the toughest part of this job, is really trying to challenge microaggressions, challenge stereotypes, and do so in a way that makes change, and in a way that pushes people to rethink how they say things and what they say. uh, it's really hard, and I don't know, of course there's lots of methods that you can use. I've heard people talk about the sandwich method when giving feedback, right? Like start with something positive and then put in the negative piece and then the positive. I don't find that particularly authentic, but I think the important part about conflict is just being brave and really saying what you mean, right? I think that when we become really, really inundated with being perceived incorrectly or saying the wrong thing, of course there's risk, right? There's risk associated, especially if you come from a community that's been marginalized or historically marginalized. There's a lot of risk, right? As uh, to kind of call somebody out on their BS. But I think the important piece is really trying to help people navigate how to say something and get through without getting tangled in like respectability politics. And there's so many things to unpack here, but I think that more leaders need training in conflict and conflict resolution, and specifically conflict resolution when it comes to power dynamics and it comes to identity, right? If you're a white manager supervising people of color, you absolutely need to have a thoughtful reflection or conversation about how your white privilege could be impacting your supervisory relationships with people of color, and navigate those relationships. Because if you're not doing that, you're putting the burden on staff of color to navigate relationships with you, right? So I think that's an important piece.
I think that's a huge piece. And also understanding as a manager, as an executive, as that person who is in power, your self awareness that, you could be a great manager, but at the end of the day, it's your livelihood when your team comes to you and gives constructive feedback, or they bring something up that is uncomfortable as well. And there is risk, to your point, talking about that too. So really investing in those resources, conversations, creating that space, and understanding your privilege in that conversation is super important. Definitely not easy, but also if you sign up to be a manager, you sign up to be an executive, it's part of the job as well, and leading your team. Matt, I feel like our time has flown by together, but is there anything that I didn't ask? I want to pass the mic to you that you want to share or underscore anything that we kind of talked about that you hope really people think about after hearing our conversation today.
Yeah, I think ultimately sense of belonging really matters, right? I think sense of belonging is something that has now become another buzzword in this space of talking about diversity, inclusion, and whether it's equity or belonging. And I think people are throwing around belonging without fully understanding what it is and what the power is. I did my dissertation on the experience of queer people of color and sense of belonging in different contexts. And what we found, and what is, I think, critical to understanding about the workplace, is sense of belonging is about feeling like you can come as your authentic self to work. Feeling like you have people that look like you in leadership. You have people who are going to take the time to pronounce your name correctly, right? Um, there's lots of a lot of people think that it's about creating structures, and yes, that's true. You want to create a receptive culture for people to feel like they can be successful in your company, but it's also the little things that really, really, really matter. There's a researcher in the higher ed world, David Yeager, who talks about sense of belonging. And he talked about a study that he did that really stuck with me, where he took two groups of students, graded papers, and half of the grades that were F's, he just put the letter F on them, and that was it, returned their paper. Then the other half, he put the letter F and then said, there's a lot of potential here. Let's talk. I really think this could be better. Now, which of those groups of students do you think did better ultimately in the class? Right? It's the group that feels cared for. And that's just like a silly example, but we see examples of that time and time and time again. And if managers would just take an extra moment to think about ways that they can institute sense of belonging into their everyday management practices, I think they'll see some major growth in employee satisfaction and employee performance, and beyond the radical flexibility, also just making people feel cared for, and that they have a sense of belonging in their workplace. Think about what it means to have a sense of belonging. Where is a community or a place that you belong to, that you feel that sense of belonging? And why wouldn't you want to emulate that at work, right? Now, I'm not saying blur boundaries and create the culture of everyone's family here. We're not doing that, right? But we're just creating opportunities for people to feel a greater sense of belonging. That's the easiest way I can say it. If you go to work every day and don't have to worry about changing anything about yourself, then you don't realize how great of a privilege that is until you interact with people who are code switching and coming into work and feeling like they can't be their authentic selves, or they can't share all of their ideas because there's a lot of risk associated with that, right? So I think sense of belonging is if we're going to talk about it, we really need to talk about it, and we really need to go deep into what does this mean for employees, and how do we build a culture where sense of belonging is a critical need and not just a cute thing we offer, right?
Yes, have some teeth behind it, really define what you mean. And I think that's a good charge and kind of question to ask people as well is what is a space, what is a community, where do you feel like you personally belong? Why is that? What has made that happen, from the interactions you have with people in this space, the physical space, the emotional virtual space that you are in, and really how can you think about creating that for or contributing to someone else and really facilitate those conversations, because it doesn't just happen, because you want a sense of belonging, you have it written on the wall, and then you do nothing about it, right? So uh,
Right.
Nat, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture. I enjoyed talking with you today.
Thank you so much, Christina.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening, at AllVoices, we really believe in employees and employers being seen, heard, and understood, and know it's a requirement for the business to succeed overall. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.